Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. It is lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me for the first time in 2023. For those of you who are new here, my name is Samantha. I am a knitter and knitwear designer, and on this channel we talk about knitting. I talk about how I design my knitwear, lots and lots of yarn, and life in the Arctic Circle of Norway, which is where I live. So yeah, I thought that a good first video of the new year would be a wrap up of all the things that I designed in 2022. So that is what we're going to do today. And 2022 was a bit of a fun year for me, actually. It's the first year that I got into designing knitwear. So I started kind of at the tail end of 2021, and then I put my first design into test knitting in January, I think, of 2022. So basically, like from the start of 2022, that's when I started designing knitwear, and then it's kind of taken off a bit. There's quite a lot that I have to show you today, which is why I had to split up things that I've designed in 2022 and then things that I knit in 2022 that other people designed, which is coming soon. That video will be up in a couple of weeks, hopefully 2 weeks, not too long. And yes, a couple of new things in 2023. I have a new mic, so hopefully the audio will be better. The sun is coming back up over the horizon again, so I can do a better job of lighting for you guys in these videos. And I would absolutely love if there's anything that you want to see from me this year, more works in progress, or more kind of tidbits of life in Tromsø and the little Norwegian city/village where I live, or I mean anything really that you're interested in. Feel free to pop a comment and let me know what you are, what you want to see more of. So yeah, without further ado, let us get into it. And I am not actually, I'm not wearing anything that I have hand knit or knit at all this year. I'm just wearing a store-bought cashmere black sweater, so to not distract from all the knits that I'm going to show you. And I figured an easy way to do this would be just kind of pop up the garment, tell you a little about it, and then I have some footage that I filmed before this video of myself wearing all the different sweaters. So I will pop that in and show you as I am discussing each one, and I'm going to go in chronological order. So from the first thing I designed this year, all the way to something that I cast off in late December 2022. And most of these patterns are released and available on my website if you want to knit your own. That would be so much fun. I love, love, love seeing other people's versions of my knitwear patterns. And yeah, I mean, there's a couple at the end that are not released yet, but they will be soon. So keep an eye out for those. And I will put the name and all the yarns and everything in here so that if you don't hear me well, or if you want to go through and look at what was what afterwards, then you can do that if you so desire. So yes, the first garment that I designed and knit in 2022 was my Soldag sweater. Is this the front? I never know when I'm showing you guys, but I think, no, this is the back. This is the front, right here. Yeah. So this, I mean, they're both the same. It's just that it has I don't know if you can see this, it has a high-low hem. So you kind of, I mean, it's pretty obvious which side is the front and the back, but the paneling is the same. It's just knit a little bit shorter in the front. I'm extremely proud of this, especially because it was my first knitwear design. So I think for that, I kind of threw myself a little into the deep end with all the cabling, but structurally it is super, super easy to make. It's just these two squares essentially that you knit up for the front and the back, and then there's a couple decreases around the shoulder area just to make it a nice, clean line, a better fit than kind of the bulk that you get through traditional drop shoulder sweaters. And then you just pick up sleeves from here and you knit them in the round all the way to the ribbing on the cuffs. And when I knit this sweater, I hadn't quite discovered the beautiful, beautiful world of Italian cast on and bind off. So I definitely recommend now when you knit something like this that you use that, or you bind off in pattern to make a much nicer, more invisible edge. But yeah, I knit this. The backstory to this sweater was that up in the Arctic Circle where I live, and actually what we're in right now, we have this time called mørketida, or the dark time, and it means that the sun does not come over the horizon at all. And this starts at the end of November and it goes until January 21st, which is Tromsø's Soldagen, or the day that the sun finally comes back up. And it's a big deal. I actually the darkness kind of gets to you. You really miss the sun, and so I started to feel that my second winter of living in Tromsø, and I wanted something that I could wear on the first day of the sun coming back that was like cheery and a bit kind of, I don't know, happy and celebratory, and so I made this sweater. And I knit it out of Drops Soft Tweed in the shade Citron Pie, or Lemon Pie, Lemon Tart. And I used a thread of Drops Kid Silk in the shade Vanilla along with it. And this is knit up on 5mm needles, and I used 4.5s for the ribbing. So it knit up fairly quickly, actually, even with kind of the complicated little cable motifs, which honestly is, I don't know, I feel like when they were charted out and you had a stitch counter is a game changer, because that makes it really easy to tell where you are on all of the charts. But the thing that I like about this is, I mean, first of all, it has a special place in my heart because it's my first knitwear design. I like the high-low hem, although you can choose to forego that and just knit them the same length if you prefer. I definitely think so one of my knitwear goals for 2023 is that I want to try different brands of yarn. As you can see in the next projects that I'm going to show you, I've used a lot of Drops yarn in 2022. I have a Drops retailer, actually, that's a 5-minute walk away from me, so it's just very convenient yarn for me to pick up and use. But I have really wanted to start working more with Sandnes Garn, which is a Norwegian yarn manufacturer, which I also, the same store as a distributor for Sandnes Garn as well. And then we have a Knitting for Olive store, or distributor store, quite close by. I want to try more Knitting for Olive. I want to use Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. So I'm just really excited to find a yarn alternative to this sweater and maybe knit up a second sample in something else, and maybe not tweed, but like a different kind of yarn, just to see what the texture feels like in a different yarn. So yes, this is Soldag. Love this. The next sweater that I knit up in 2022, and like all of these sweaters are inspired by some kind of a place, or somewhere that I've lived, somewhere I want to travel to, or somewhere that I've been. And so, yeah, that's the theme. Soldag is inspired by the sun day in Norway, the day that the sun comes up, and Liscannor is inspired by the stone near the cliffs of Galway in the cliffs of Moher in Galway, Ireland, which is where I lived when I did my master's degree. So the Liscannor sweater is knit in Drops Eyre. It's another drop shoulder sweater that knit up just super duper fast. And I don't know if you can see here, I will have some pictures, and I'll have some B-roll so that you can get a better look. But it has 5 separate panels, and each panel has a different kind of texture on it. And you create these textures with entirely knit and purl stitches. So when I designed this sweater, it was around the time that the Guernsey Genser by Sandnes Garn came out. And I really wanted, I loved that trend of like the Guernsey sweater and Strikkechick, as we called it in Norway. But I wanted to make my own version of a Strikkechick sweater that used only knit and purl stitches. That was kind of beginner friendly, and you know, there's 2 symbols on the chart. So if you're just learning how to read charts, it's a good kind of starter pattern for you. So that's what I did with the Liscannor sweater. It's a drop shoulder sweater knit from the bottom up and then separated for the front and back. And then you pick up sleeves and knit them from the top down in the round. And like the Soldag sweater, it's also got a split hem. on the bottom. And it fits really, really comfortably. Like this is one of the sweaters that I grab for the most, I think, in my wardrobe, because one, it's a neutral color and it goes with a lot of different garments or outfits. And it also it fits so nicely and so effortlessly, and it's very soft and comfy because I knit this in Drops Eyre in the shade medium gray. And I have a bit of a complicated relationship with Drops Eyre. I have on multiple occasions said that it is my favorite yarn, and it really was my favorite yarn. But I think that they have changed something about the way that it's manufactured, and so the most recent Drops Eyre that I've bought from the store near me, it's just not the same. Somehow it feels a bit thinner and less fluffy. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll find a new favorite yarn in 2023 and I will update you guys when that happens. As far as how it's worn, I mean, I haven't actually depilled this sweater, but there's a little bit of pilling. I don't know if I can find, like, over here, kind of off to the sides. I don't know if you can see that a little bit. But it's nothing extreme. I mean, especially for a fluffy blow yarn like this, it's not nearly as much as you would expect there to be, maybe. I don't know, I thought there'd be more. I was actually very surprised with the soft tweed from Soldag that there was no pilling there, but yeah, I like this a lot. I do want to knit. One of my test knitters knit a sample where she used a different color for every single textured pattern, and I loved that so much. I thought that was super creative and a great use of leftover yarn. So I would love to knit a version of the Liscannor sweater where I use a different color for each panel. So that's probably, if I knit this again, and I probably will because it's such a quick knit and I really like knitting it, then I think I will do that, and I will use a different color, maybe a different color neutral. I think that would look nice for each different texture on there. Right, and the next sweater that I knit was the Adams Morgan sweater, which, because oh, I love this yarn. This sweater, so it's called the Adams Morgan sweater because Adams Morgan used to be a place that I frequented a lot with my coworkers when I lived and worked outside of DC. So we would go into Adams Morgan, we would get chashu buns and really nice food. We would go to bookstores and antique stores and just hang around. And it was super, super fun. And I loved how kind of diverse and interesting everything in Adams Morgan was, and it kind of, the whole combination of textures and the whole, like, you know, super duper colorful yarn just reminded me of that a lot. So that's why it's called Adams Morgan. It has a cable, well, several cable panels on the front. This broken lattice stitch that's kind of the main defining feature there. And it has double seed stitch on the back. And it's knit from the bottom up. So you knit the body in the round, you knit the arms in the round from the bottom up. And they also have fun little cables on them. And then you join everything in the round and you knit raglan decreases at the top. And then there's some optional short rows that you can use to raise the back. So this was my first pattern to incorporate short rows, and that was a really fun learning experience, I think. But yeah, I grabbed for this sweater quite a bit. It's a very nicely sized raglan, I think. It's not overly loose, and it doesn't make me feel like I'm overly constricted at the armholes. It's just kind of very nice, relaxed, fits well under a coat, but also kind of just like leaves me a lot of breathing room. And then, yeah, I just really like this one. I used Hobbii Tweed Delight in the shade Pink Confetti. So I think I was drawn to the yarn in the first place because it reminded me a little bit of Yarnicorn by We Are Knitters. But I didn't want to use such thick yarn, so I went for this, and then I forget what needle size I used. It was either 5 or 5.5, but I'll put that info in here. And I think if I did this again, I would knit a double folded collar just because I got more into those the more that I kept designing. But I don't know, I mean, it was just wide enough. It sits, you'll see how it sits when I have the B-roll footage. I don't want to bring this too close to the mic. But I think it sits really well, and I was really proud of myself with my first raglan pattern, because grading that for different sizes was quite a challenge. Yeah. But yeah, this is Adams Morgan, and I love it. After that, I moved on to summer knits. So I have a camisole that I have a fun video, but like I also I'm still wearing my like what do you call that? Like I had like a spaghetti strap top underneath all my sweaters as I tried them on for the B-roll, and I just left it on for this. So it's not supposed to be worn like that, and I'll pop some pictures in so you can see what it's meant to look like. But this is the Davenport camisole, and it's inspired by the sea glass at Davenport Beach in California. I used Knitting for Olive's heavy merino yarn of just under 2 skeins actually, so it was very very budget friendly with really nice yarn. And I think it was, oh gosh, I don't know if it was Dusty Aqua. I'll have to put that color name down below. It's just a really pretty, it reminded me a lot of sea glass green. It has some speckles of purple in there. But yeah, it's a really, really pretty, almost sage green with a little bit of variegation. And I thought that was super, super nice. And then I have this little lace detailing at the hem. And it kind of, I wanted something that had a little bit of lace, because I think lace looks really nice and elegant on camisoles. But I didn't want it to be kind of overly lacy, because I mean, I like having more coverage at the top of my summer tops. So basically what I did was I just had these little stem looking things come up from the lace, so that you have a little bit of surface interest on the rest of the camisole that almost kind of pulls it together like a corset. It gives it that kind of fit, I think, at least. But it's like, it's very opaque, so it covers you well if you don't want to wear a bra under it, which I did not when I wore it in Nice, France on vacation. And I have, you knit this, it's kind of an applied I-cord edge, but it also uses live stitches. So you have these stitches on the front and on the back that you kind of left on a spare thread, and then you pick up stitches along this diagonal where you do the decreases on the front, and you knit an I-cord edge all the way along the edge of the camisole, and then knit a separate I-cord strap or 2 I-cord straps depending on how you want this to wear. And what I did was I put a little clasp, I don't know if you can, yeah, I put a little clasp on it so that I can just put it over my head and clasp it on to the inside of the camisole right here. And I think the way that I designed this, I was actually quite proud of myself, because the lace and like the bottom, this area, you base it off of your waist measurement, and then when you move up to this area, you base it off of your bust measurement. So you can customize it depending, because I know it's supposed to be fitted, so it's a bit kind of tricky there, because different women have different proportions, and I wanted to account for that in the design of the garment. So yeah, this taught me quite a bit, and I think I am very, very happy with how it came out. Very grateful to the people who tested it for me and used different combinations, and it looked amazing on everyone. So yeah, I am really looking forward to some warmer weather and wearing this again. But it's my one summer knit that I designed, and it's Davenport camisole. So yeah, love it. Right. The next thing that I knit was also in Drops Eyre. This is the Saleya vest, and it was inspired by the Cours Saleya, which is a marketplace in Nice in France, where vendors sell fresh flowers and herbs and produce every day. And it's this lilac lavendery, almost like stocky faux cable pattern, and the color that reminded me of it. This is a really fun vest. I think it has a really fun design. So I knit the front and the back separately using this kind of, it looks kind of like a cable motif from further away, but you create it using knit 2 together, slip knits, and yarn overs essentially. And then you just Kitchener join. Let's see if I can show you the 2 pieces together. pick up and knit a folded collar, and then you knit a lot of ribbing. So you pick up and knit button bands on either sides of the vest, and then you have buttons on both the sides as a fun little accent piece. And this is the pattern where I really learned the Italian cast on and bind off. So oodles and oodles of Italian bind off, which I promise is worth it in the end. It just looks so nice and so neat. And then you pick up and knit ribbing for the bottom of the vest, which is actually quite interesting. This is the first time that I learned how to use a provisional cast on. And it's actually like these corners are really, really nice. I like the way that kind of, they're really nice mitered edges. Yeah, I did wear this to the actual course Saleya in this, and I took some photos, and it was lovely. It was a dream. And I'm actually, this is Drops Eyre in the shade Purple Haze, and I'm making one right now actually in Drops Eyre in the shade Coral Reef for my mom, who was really, really into this design and wanted one when I went to visit her earlier in 2022. So yes, there will be a second Saleya vest sample, and my mom and I will be twinning, and you're welcome to join us. I have the pattern in the link below, as with everything else. My next knit I have, this I think probably took me the longest to knit up as a sample. This is my Menlo sweater. And it's inspired by Menlo Castle in Galway, Ireland. That has, I mean, it's just this really, really pretty abandoned castle, just a little bit outside the city of Galway. And you have ivy and just like overgrown, the only thing that's standing right is the structure, the like outside structure of the castle, or the manor as it used to be. And you have ivy cascading down the walls. And I thought like this cable and rope design was very kind of reminiscent of the ivy cascading down the walls, and that's why it's called the Menlo sweater. It is it's a bit of a modified drop shoulder knit. So you knit it from the bottom up, you separate for the front and the back, just enough that you can pick up arms and knit them from the top down in the round. But before you knit the arms from the top down in the round, you have just a tiny, tiny bit of short row shaping to give it a bit more structure, or like a nicer kind of drape in the arm, in like the shoulder area, which I think is the hardest place to kind of, if you're doing a drop shoulder but you want it to be a bit more fitted, I think that's a good way to go about it. It's just adding in a little bit of short rows around where the top of your shoulder is to accommodate for that extra space. So that's what this has. And then I'm quite proud of the way that you have this cable ribbing at the bottom. Don't know if you can see that. Yes, you can. So you have this cable ribbing at the bottom that kind of seamlessly flows into the cables, and then you have the same cable ribbing around the neck opening. So I'm quite proud of that little detail. And then you have the same thing with the sleeve cups. But then also you decrease some stitches in the middle of these cables so that you get kind of a little bit of a poof down by the wrist area and a bit of a tighter cuff, which I think is always nice when you have sleeves like this. And I knit this with Rowan felted tweed in the shade Pine, which I actually bought from Lovecraft during one of their sales, and I bought 6 skeins of it. And as I was knitting this up, I was like, oh my god, 6 skeins is not going to be enough, but it was. And I even had some left over, so that was a very, very nice surprise, because my local yarn store does indeed sell Rowan felted tweed, but they sell it for like $20 a skein, which is quite a bit more than I paid for it from Lovecrafts. So very happy I did not have to buy more. It's a bit cropped, but you can add extra length if you wish, and a couple testers did, and it looks absolutely wonderful. And this was not a very quick knit, but I really love it, and I reach for it all the time. It's nice because it doesn't shed that much somehow, and it doesn't really pill. I don't know what it is with tweedy yarns. I don't know if you've noticed this. Let me know if you have, but I feel like my tweedy yarns pill a lot less than my other yarns. I don't know why, but yeah. this is the Menlo sweater. We're only halfway through. Oh man, this really puts it into perspective, I think. Just seeing everything that I've designed and going, wow, that is a lot of stuff. The next pattern that I knit and released was the Tuscan sweater. And I know you can't see it well in this light, so I'll pop up a photo. I had some yarn in my stash. Drops Eyre in the shade Clay, and Drops Soft Tweed in the shade, not Drops Soft Tweed, Drops Kid Silk in the shade Almond. And I had them left over from previous projects. I just had like a remainder of a skein of each. And I held them together and I knit up a little swatch because I thought it looked super pretty. And what I found was when you hold them up to the sunlight, it looks a little bit like copper gold. Like I'll have a picture in there so you can see, but like it's these pearl bumps that really bring that out. It's funny because in the dark it looks a bit more like red clay, and then in the sunlight the gold really picks up and it just like it shines. It's beautiful. And that reminded me of the colors of a Tuscan sunset. And what I wanted was a pattern that would make this shine, but also just have a little bit of sophisticated elegance. And so you have this really nice lace yoke. I'll set aside this reverse stockinette texture. And you don't actually have the knit purl stitches in here, so what I did was you knit from the bottom up until the yoke. You knit the body separately and the arm separately, but you knit them in stockinette and then just like flip it inside out and then join for the yoke. So you can just knit stitches the whole way and you don't have to worry about all of this purling, unless you're someone who likes purling, in which case feel free to just purl all the stitches. But yeah, and then you have this yoke, and I have like a little tutorial video for a couple special symbols on this yoke chart, just to help out. And there's a little bit of short row shaping in the back, but that's actually done before you even start the yoke. So you join everything and then you have to purl the short rows, unfortunately, and then you start knitting the lace yoke, but it really does help with the fit. And there is a double folded collar at the top, because I got really into double folded collars around the time I knit the Saleya vest, and so after that I was like, oh yes, all of the double folded collars. But yeah, I mean, you can modify that if you so prefer, but I think it adds a little bit of a nice touch to the sweater. And it has a little bit of a split hem over here. I like that. It just keeps it from getting a little too tight around my hips. And yeah, as far as this yarn has worn, it actually hasn't pilled as much. I think it's the combination of combining Drops Eyre with a mohair yarn. And I think that's true for a lot of yarns that would traditionally be sheddy by themselves. And then if you hold them with a mohair, I don't know, it's just something about, I don't know, maybe it helps structural integrity. I have no clue, but it has not pilled, and I've worn it quite a bit. So yeah, these, I'm just showing you like where it would pill, but it hasn't, so I'm quite pleased about that. Ooh, one of my favorite designs from this year was the Bonnieux cardigan. Oh man, this was very, very special yarn. I picked it up when I was in Nice on vacation from the yarn store La Droguerie, which, oh, it's an experience. If you're in France, you should definitely find the closest one to you and go, because, oh, I mean, all the fabric and all the beautiful yarns and everything. They have I think it's a dye house that's somewhere, it's somewhere in a kind of more rural location, but they get all of their yarns spun there and dyed there, and they're exclusive to La Droguerie. They don't sell other brands as far as I'm aware. I didn't see any other brands, I just saw their own yarns, but they're all so lovely. And this is Duvet d'Anjou, which is a mix of merino and angora wool. And it's in the shade Pâté d'Anco, which is a really, really nice, bright orangey red, as you can probably see. And I used this, this floret design in here. This is from a vintage knitting pattern book that I found. It's a traditionally French pattern, and I thought that, you know, the French yarn and the French pattern, and it reminds me a lot of poppies that are found in the Bonnieux Valley in Provence. So yeah, this is the Bonnieux cardigan. And it's knit from the top down. This is when I started getting into top down knits. Yeah, so it's knit top down with some raglan shaping, different shaping gradients for different sizes. This was a very, very complicated pattern for me personally as a designer. This is where I started to hit snags with different sizes and your starting stitch counts and needing to do compound increases, which is when you have different rates of increases for different sizes through the same number of stitches, just to get a good fit for everyone. But my lovely, lovely test knitters were so patient and so nice with just the whole process. So we were able to do that, and I am very proud of what has come out of it. So in my sample, I have these very wide, very billowy bell sleeves, but I have included instructions in the pattern for decreases in the sleeves for anyone who wants a tighter fitting sleeve. And you can always also knit it longer if you don't like a cropped cardigan, but I prefer to wear my cardigans like this over dresses. So I like them to be a little bit cropped so that my natural waistline is still kind of out and not buried underneath a very thick cardigan. Yeah, this is Bonnieux, and I liked it so much I made it twice. So that was the Duvet d'Anjou sample, and this is upside down. This is my Bonnieux cardigan in Drop Sky. And this is, I had a bit of an unpleasant surprise when I made this sample where I was using Drop Sky that I had in my stash, and I needed an extra skein of Drop Sky to finish it out, and so I went to the yarn store and I picked up a skein of Drop Sky in the same color. Now I expected dye lot differences because you have those, right? But what I saw was that there were actually huge differences in the way that the yarn feels. So their Drop Sky, it kind of looks a bit like a chainette yarn, you know, like it looks, if you've seen Knitting for Olive's Double Soft Merino, which is a discontinued yarn, but it's kind of the same look to it. It's not really a blow yarn, but it is kind of airy, and it's because of these, I don't know, these different strands of yarn that have a little bit of air in them, but the fabric should be kind of fluffy enough that you don't see those. That was not the case with the new Drop Sky. With the old one, sure, but then when you knit them in the same garment, you can very, very easily tell where the old one stops and the new one begins, because the texture is just so different. I mean, it was not as fluffy, it was much more stretchy, and it just felt rougher. And it looked rougher, like it didn't look like the same yarn when it was knit up. And that was very disappointing. So what I did was I just ended up frogging a sweater that I have in my stash that I don't really wear anymore. That was knit with the same yarn. It's what this sky was left over from. So yeah, I just was able to finish my Bonnieux cardigan in Drop Sky, which, I mean, this Drop Sky is much softer than the yarn I used for my original sample. So I think this is a lot nicer to have up against my skin, but I think it doesn't wear as well. Like the yarn doesn't hold up as well. It's already kind of pilling a bit. You can see that. At the Duvet d'Anjou is just wonderful. I mean, it's barely stretched. It's held its shape really well. And so I think it's a more sturdy yarn to knit something like this cardigan in. Because like if it's, I mean, I can see this growing a lot more as well, just because of the lace pattern. And with wear, it would kind of, like, so yeah. But yeah, I'm still happy I made a second sample of it, because I like having a nice neutral light cardigan that I can chuck over a dress in summer evenings or on vacation. Yeah, and then, I don't know, okay, so when I had started podcasting last summer, time flies, but last summer is when I started this podcast, and pretty soon into starting it, I got stranded in Oslo. So Oslo and Tromsø, Norway is a really long country, right? And so I was stuck in Oslo on the southern tip, and I live all the way up north. So I had to take a 26-hour bus ride back home, which was quite an adventure. And I was like, right, if I'm going to do that, I need yarn. I need to knit because I can't sleep on the bus, and I don't want to just sit there. I didn't know if they'd have outlets. It was a mess. So I went to a yarn store called Strikkechick in a mall near the Oslo train station, and I picked up Sandnes Garn Pure Gynt in the shade Jelly Bean Green, and I also picked up Sandnes Garn Tin Silk Mohair in the shade Jelly Bean Green, and I knit this sweater on the bus. And this is my Strand sweater. Yeah, and it's named Strand. It's a bit of a double entendre, right? It's named Strand because I was stranded in Oslo, and when we were driving back up, we were driving along the west coast of Norway, which has a lot of fjords and beaches, which is, the word for beach is strand in Norwegian. So yeah. So I didn't do an Italian cast on for the bottom because I started that on the bus and I didn't have a spare needle to do it with, which was quite sad. But I did do it for the sleeves, and I knit this from the bottom up using this fun slip stitch. Well, it's a yarn over ribbing texture. It's quite fun to knit when you get the hang of it, and I think it looks really nice, and it just kind of it comes in right from the ribbing. So basically after the ribbing you increase just a little bit so that you can accommodate for the pattern without breaking the rib, which I'm very proud of. And because the sleeves are meant to be kind of fitted, but the body is a bit looser, there's a different decrease rate for the sleeves and the front and the back. And so in the pattern, I've written the instructions out like pattern repeat by pattern repeat for every single size, because they're obviously different and they have to get to different stitch counts and fit just as well. So it's a bit of a long pattern just because of that. But I think it's been quite effective at making sure that everything is okay and everyone gets the fit that they want. And it has a folded neckline also. And I just love this color so much, honestly. I think it was, there were a lot of people calling it the year's it color last year. I think even still, bright colors are very, very in. Bright orange and bright cobalt blue, magenta, this green. And I honestly, there are some colors, I don't know how well they'd stand the test of time, but I love this color. And I don't know, I just think it'll always be like a bright, cheery, I mean, it would be really sad to have a sweater that resulted from this 26-hour terrible bus ride experience and it's just kind of bland. So I like that it's this instead, and it's very bright and festive. And it's quite a good Christmas sweater, I realized, because of the color. So I wore it a little bit around that season, and I wore it and felt very Scandinavian when I visited my parents in the States. I was like, yes, I have the white sneakers and the wide jeans and this sweater. So yeah. I'm definitely not American anymore. It's like a little vibe. Yeah, this is the Strand sweater, and there are beautiful versions on Instagram actually of all of these under the hashtags that I have for each sweater, that I set up for each. Like, oh, I love the fact that I've set up these hashtags and people are actually populating them with their own pictures of the sweaters. Oh, dream come true. And my most recent release, okay, as of filming, I released this sweater 3 days ago. So yeah, very, very recent. This is the Kamari sweater. That's a bit crooked at the bottom. This is the Kamari sweater. So one of my, like, oh my gosh, I'm a designer moments of last year was when Tyler of Thought to Thread Yarn offered a couple of people free yarn in order to design a pattern. And I was one of them. So I got this lovely Ritual DK, which is a non-superwash merino base in the shade Seattle Gray. And I chose to knit, I love how cables pop in his yarn, honestly. Like I think they have such good definition. So I wanted to use it for the whole sweater. So we have this all over kind of horseshoe or wishbone cable looking pattern. It's a drop shoulder from the bottom up with a little bit of short row shaping around here. And you pick up in knit sleeves from the top down. And since I knit this sample, people have pointed out that they don't like the way that these holes kind of are so close to where the seam is, which fair play. So what I did in the pattern was I added in a couple, a couple rounds of just knit stitches before you start the actual motif. And I think that gives it a much nicer look, and testers seem to agree with that. And so all the ones you see on Instagram have that modification done. So yeah, just another example of how it is so nice to have people who really help you improve your pattern and just make it the best it can be. And I, again, double folded collar, but this time I went with 2x2 ribbing that I think just fits better into the cable design. And it's just, I think it's a good pattern for, I mean, this is a pretty, a nice tonal yarn, but you can use variegated yarns. There's a couple pictures up there with variegated yarns, and they're amazing. I love them so much. But yeah, I think this is a really nice, relaxed sweater. It's really easy to wear, and it feels like wearing a hug because it's so kind of plushy and squishy because of the nice texture. So yeah. This is the Kamari sweater. Ooh. And it was the first pattern I released in 2023, and it's actually the ones that I'm going to show you now. They haven't been released yet, but they will be released soon, so that's what we're moving into. This sweater is the Maryland Heights sweater. It was designed, so I had online, or ordered online, a lot of yarn from the States. And I had it shipped to my parents' house because, first of all, customs charges and also extra shipping charges to Norway are a beast. So I just figured I'll send them to my parents and they can wait there. And then when I visit, I'll pick it up and take it. And so I did that. And I also, while I had a suitcase full of yarn, wanted to go to some local yarn stores in the US and pick up some more yarn that I could touch and feel in person. And I did. I went to a lovely shop in downtown Leesburg, which is a suburb of Virginia. It was called the Finch Sewing and Knitting Studio. And I bought this Quince&Co owl in different colors. So I don't remember all the colorways off the top of my head, but I'll put them down in the description below or in the little boxes that pop up, either one. But what I was really drawn to was this really rich chocolatey brown. But unfortunately, they only had 2 skeins of it. So I figured, why don't I make a colorwork sweater with these yarn colors together? So I picked up a little bit of gray and some of this beige and this burgundy over here. And I drafted a little chart and made the Maryland Heights sweater. And I named it Maryland Heights because it feels like a really nice outdoor sweater, like an outdoor fall sweater. The colors and just how nice and warm it is with all the colorwork floats in the yoke. And my favorite fall hike from back home is the Maryland Heights hike. That's also pretty near my parents' house because we live near the Virginia-Maryland border. So yeah. This, and the testers for this sweater have just been making it in the most gorgeous color combinations. Like, I think, honestly, my favorite part of designing colorwork, because this is the first colorwork garment I've ever designed, but the best part of it is seeing all the different combinations that people come up with and just how beautiful they are, because I have just been in love just watching all of these pop up in the chat and Instagram, and it's just been amazing. And this pattern should be coming out in February, so keep your eyes peeled if you're interested. And I will also definitely be putting out an update. But yeah, I love how this fits. I love that it's mostly colorwork. So my major qualm with colorwork sweaters is that I like knitting colorwork, but when I'm knitting colorwork, I want the sweater to kind of feature it. Like, I don't want there to be much single color stockinette. And that's what I did here. So I have a lot of colorwork details around the cuffs and at the bottom of the body, and then I have just a little bit of plain stockinette to break up the colorwork sections. And so I think that just makes it, I don't know, a little bit more fancy, kind of, than what I usually associate with colorwork sweaters. And another sweater that plays with yarn colors is my Lyngen pullover, which, so there is a video, I can pop it in here if you want to check that out, probably at the end of this video, where I went ice skating on a frozen mountain lake in the Lyngen Alps of Norway. And I wore this sweater to do it. And the colors remind me a little bit of that lake. It has this, it's this really dramatic, bright blue color, as you'll see at the end. And it's surrounded by these wonderful ice-capped mountains. And that's what the yarn, so the yarn that I bought, the variegated mohair that I held with my main color Drops Nepal, it's called Isdans, or Ice Dance. It's from Unikt Garn, a Norwegian yarn supplier, and I held it with Drops Nepal in the shade Off-White. Just because I really, really love variegated mohairs. And I think the fun thing about this sweater is that you can use 2 skeins of variegated mohair. For my size, I think 3 smallest sizes you could use, like, it's 2 hanks of variegated mohair, so like 100 grams total, and you can get a whole sweater out of it by holding it with a slightly cheaper yarn, or a very cheaper yarn like Drops Nepal. This is knit on 6mm needles, so it's a very, very quick knit, and its feature is this, whoop, I am caught in my mic, this chevron pattern you see over here, which I thought was like a really cool surface texture element to it. It looks a little bit like fish scales. So it's like you go skating on a frozen lake, and then the Isdans thing played into it, and Lyngen, because it's in the Lyngen Alps, and the colors are very reminiscent of what that experience was like, and so it all just tied together, and this is the Lyngen pullover. I think I said sweater, it's the Lyngen pullover. Yes, and it's got a double folded collar as usual, knit raglans. It's got short row shaping at the top, and it is knit from the top down. Because that's how I knit sweaters now. I have been fully converted. I knit Bonnieux from the top down, and then I knit a couple sweaters from the bottom up, and I'm like, right, okay, top down sweaters. This is what we're gonna do going forward. So I did. And I think this is super, super nice. The testers for this sweater are already finishing up. They have, there are some testers who went with variegated base yarns, and then single color mohair yarns, which is also a gorgeous alternative. And yeah, there are people who've knit this in single colors, which is also, wonderful. It helps the texture stand out a lot. But yeah, I think the most fun thing about this is just being able to play around with all the different color combinations that you could choose from. And it will be out probably at the beginning of March. So I'm very excited for that release. Right, the next sweater, we're getting to the end here. This sweater I haven't even put into testing yet, but it might be up for testing by the time this video goes out, so I might have a link at the bottom for you if you're interested in knitting the Eyre pullover. That is, I'm showing you the front. Yes. Aha. So this actually is my most worn sweater at the moment. I have been living in this. And the reason for it is, you'll see in the way that it fits, I just love it. I knit the sleeves to be like a nice wrap over your hands comfort length, but you can still fold them up if you want. It's just very nice and loose fitting, so it's good for layering over. I've been using a very nice kind of, what is that material called? I have this button-down shirt that's kind of a little bit see-through. It has these kind of polka dots on it. It's very like lacy and flowy and nice, and I've been putting that underneath this as a very like feminine vibe. What my goal was with this pullover was, I saw this picture on Ravelry of a very vintage fisherman sweater from, I think it was the 20s or the 30s. And I wanted to make something similar, but with a more contemporary look and feel. And this is what I got. So it has these different textured panels. You have this kind of horseshoe in the front and these twisted rib cables and this little zigzag over here, and it's all set against a seed stitch background that's more defined on the sleeves. And it's raglan from the top down with a little bit of short row shaping in pattern. And one of the things I want to do when I write out the pattern for this is I want to write out the short row instructions for every single size. Just because obviously the pattern is different depending on how many stitches you've increased after the collar is complete. And this is Drops Eyre in the shade Pink Sand, held double. So it's knit on 9mm needles. It's a very, very quick knit. Yeah, it's kind of cropped, slightly cropped. It sits right at my hips, so I wouldn't even call it that cropped, really. But I'm one of those, like, if it sits at your belly button, that's a cropped sweater, but most people think that's way, way too short. And yeah, it's just so, I feel like the yarn works really nicely with the texture because it's not that bulky, even though it is held double. Just because of the nature of the yarn itself, it's so light and airy, and it's actually the reason why it's named the Eyre Pullover. It's EYRE. It's after Eyre Square in Galway, where I lived when I did my master's. Because Eyre Square, it has that element of very classic, traditional elegance, but it's also very up and coming, very kind of, it's very millennial and Gen Z oriented. There's a lot of like very fun shops and bars and brunch places and that. So it's just a very nice melding of very traditional and classic and new and modern. And I thought that's what this sweater is. So that's why it's named the Eyre Pullover. And that will be out for testing very, very soon. And the last design I have to show you guys is quite long. Oh, I want to call this the Fjellblomst cardigan, but so that means mountain flower in Norwegian. But I'm still unclear. I'm not married to the name. This is a very, very long duster cardigan knit in mostly stockinette stitch with Garn Meek Pafugl, which means soft peacock. It's a like base silk mohair yarn. It's a very chunky silk mohair. Or no, it's not silk mohair. It's a mohair yarn, a very chunky mohair yarn with a wool thread instead of a silk thread. And it's very similar to other kinds of yarn like this that you would find, like Wool and the Gang's Take Care mohair or hip wool fluff. Also, those are thick mohairs that are the same gauge as this yarn. And it was just a very, very nice comfort knit for me. I knit it from the top down with some raglan shaping and a little cable braid along the sleeves right here. That goes into a little bit of color work or color blocking and then a nice tight cuff to keep the sleeves out of your way. So it's good for using up those leftover either silk mohairs, you can hold it 3 threads together, or thick mohair yarns in your stash. And it doesn't use up very much actually for the whole cardigan, just because of the nature of the yarn, because you use 9mm needles and the yarn is, you get so much meterage per skein. So this is extremely comfy. I didn't put buttons on it because I think it looks nice as an open front cardigan. And I think it's perfect for layering on kind of chilly spring days, maybe with some tall boots. I'm excited to see what the response is for this, but I really, really like it. And yeah, I mean, as far as how it's worn, I haven't worn it nearly enough to have a real opinion on it, but I will get back to you with that in the future. I feel like I keep waving this around because there's just so much of it. Well, that was a lot. But I hope you enjoyed seeing some of the things that I designed in 2022. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been so encouraging and so wonderful to have so many people support my knitting journey and design journey. I'm really new to the knitting world. I started in the middle of the pandemic, so it hasn't been that long really, but I've fallen in love with it, as you can see probably. But yeah, I really hope you like this video. Feel free to let me know if there's any design in particular that stood out to you. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I am so excited to be back and chat with you again next week. Until next time, happy knitting! Bye!